Hello students, we are going to continue on in our Article I notes, and we are going to be at Section 8, Powers Delegated to Congress. So for this section, we are actually answering the same question for all of the different clauses that we have here in Section 8. And so the question is, what powers does Congress have regarding the following? And I will read Clause number 1 about taxes. Congress has the power to tax and spend tax money. Tax money is used to pay debts, pay for defense, and other special programs to benefit people. Taxes must be the same in all parts of the country. So again, the question is, what powers does Congress have regarding the following? So regarding taxes, the power that Congress has is to tax and to spend tax money. And so they collect that money to pay debts, to provide defense, and to fund programs. Now, remember, we talked about one of our goals of the Constitution in the preamble is to promote the general welfare. And this is where we talked about Congress collecting taxes and then using that money to fund special programs that will benefit all people in the United States. Next one, Clause 3 is commerce. Only Congress has the power to regulate foreign and domestic commerce. Foreign commerce is trade with other countries, and domestic commerce is trade between states. Disagreements over interstate trade were a major problem with the Articles of Confederation. So commerce, first of all, is trade. We have foreign commerce, which is between us and other countries, and then domestic. Remember that word domestic from the preamble means our home, our United States, so within the states. And so Congress has the power to regulate both foreign and domestic trade. And to regulate means that they are going to set up the guidelines or set up the regulations of how trade occurs, the things that can be traded, so on and so forth. Now in Clause 4, this is about naturalizing and bankruptcy. And these are two completely different topics, but Congress has the same power regarding naturalizing and regarding bankruptcy. So Clause 4, naturalization is the process of a foreigner becoming a citizen. Bankruptcy is the condition in which a person or business cannot pay its debt. Congress has the power to pass laws on these two issues. The laws must be the same in all parts of the country. So they have the power to make laws about naturalizing and about bankruptcy. But we're going to also include in our answer a little bit of a definition for each one of them. So the first one, naturalizing, Congress is going to make laws for becoming a citizen. And we talked a little bit about this word before when we talked about the requirements for a House member and for a senator, that they have to be a U.S. citizen for 7 years in the House of Representatives and 9 years in the Senate. And we said that that means that they don't have to be born in the United States, that they can apply for citizenship, and that's called naturalization. And for that process, and I mentioned this a little bit as well, that they have to take some classes to learn about the United States. And it's a class that's very much like your U.S. history class right now, where they learn about the Constitution. And then they take a naturalization test, which is basically like a Constitution test. They're going to have very similar types of questions on that test. And then bankruptcy, it talks about that when a person cannot pay its debts. And so Congress makes the laws for those in debt who cannot repay that debt. And there are tons of different types of bankruptcy. It depends on if it's for a private business or if it's for a personal bankruptcy, that they are not able to pay back those loans that they have. And people might have to lose some property that they own But it also depends. There are some ways that you can file for bankruptcy and still keep your assets, still keep your property, but it's all different based on the kind of bankruptcy that you have to apply for. Clause number 5 is coins. Congress has the power to coin money and set its value. Congress has set up the National Bureau of Standards to regulate weights and measures. The value of currency is based on the amount of gold or silver the United States has. And we have talked about that a lot, right? That U.S. Money that we print in the U.S. is based on the gold and silver that we have. And so what Congress has the power to do is based on that gold and silver amount, they are going to print the money and they will set that value. They also decide what the money looks like, the weights and measurements. So again, specifically the coins, but in general, they are going to print all of the money. So print the paper money, and it's called coining the coins. So they make those coins as well. So clause 6 is about counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is the making of imitation money. Congress can make laws to punish counterfeiters. So imitation means that it's fake. So they will punish those who make and use fake money. Now, this is probably something that maybe in your lifetime you have actually encountered some fake money, or a parent has encountered some fake money. And what this is not talking about you. It's not talking about the people who happen to come across a fake bill and try to use it. Most of us don't realize that it's fake. Most of us don't test our paper bills to see if they're real or not before we try to use them. But some stores do check them, right? They're at some stores, they have a little machine that they can send the money through and it tells you if it's fake. Some have a marker that they can use on it that will tell you if it's fake. And most often they will check $20 bills or $50 bills or $100 bills. They don't typically check smaller bills than that. But if you were found to be using a fake bill, they're not going to be calling the police in on you, because in most cases, it's not you who made that fake money. Now, the bad part is that if you did try to use this fake money, the store, wherever it's at, is going to tell you that it's counterfeit. You won't be able to use it, and you're the one that loses out on the deal, because you are not going to be able to exchange that for real money. So you can't take a fake bill into the bank and say, oh, hey, this is a counterfeit bill. Can you exchange it for a real bill for me? That's not going to happen. So you're going to be out your $20, your $50, your $100, which is the reason why this is a problem, right? Because it hurts the regular normal people who are using this money and don't realize that they're using it. So this is one that I often refer to kind of like a thing from the movies that you see, where people create this fake money and then they devise a way to get it into circulation. And a lot of times that they do that, they put it into circulation in places like a casino, where there's tons, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that go through it on a daily basis. So it's easy for them to sort of manipulate and get that money into that circulation. It was the Ocean's 11, I think is what it was called, that had a big plan to use counterfeit money, and they got it into a casino, and that's how they got it into circulation. But I'm sure there's tons of movies about this kind of thing. And we have clause number 7, which is post offices. And Congress has the power to set up and control the delivery of mail. So that is their power. They establish post offices and postal routes. So one thing that maybe you weren't aware of, that the mail, the post office, is a government agency. It is a part of the U.S. government. It is called the U.S. Postal Service, USPS. And so you may not realize that these are government workers. And also, because of that reason, if you tamper with mail that is not addressed to you, meaning that you take someone's mail that's it's addressed to someone else and you take it, or you open mail that's addressed to someone else, that is a federal offense. And remember, federal is something that applies to our whole entire country. And so breaking a federal law is the big supreme laws of the land. Those are the no-nos, the really bad things that you're doing. And so, of course, the reason for this to be a federal law is because there is sometimes sensitive information that goes out through the mail. Things like stimulus checks that people are getting, paychecks that people are getting, credit card information. So it's really to protect people from identity theft. That's the biggest reason why we don't want people opening up somebody else's mail or taking somebody else's mail. The mailbox itself is actually property of the U.S. government. Your mailbox that you have at your house, maybe it's even attached to your house, is still technically property of the U.S. Postal Service. Clause 8 and 9, we have copyrights and patents. And perhaps you have heard of copyrights and patents before. They're not totally uncommon words to hear about. And so again, the power of Congress is the same for both of these things. So we're going to look at 8 and 9. So Congress may pass copyright and patent laws. A copyright protects an author, and a patent makes an inventor the sole owner of his or her work for a limited time. And I misspoke. We're not looking at 9 yet. That's a separate one. So 8 has copyrights and patents. So I just put them separately here. So a copyright, Congress is going to make laws to protect an author. So this is like a book, a video, or a play, music. Okay, those are things that are authored by someone, that they've created that information. And so you can't just take those things and use them without permission. You can't like copy them and put them out places. Okay, so this is one of the things that goes along with like the warnings that you see at the beginning of a DVD or a Blu-ray disc. That's a warning from the FBI about like copying and selling them. That's illegal to do. That is breaking the copyright laws. And then patents are similar, except for they are making laws to protect an inventor. So these are for products, basically, or maybe even we could say ideas. We could put it that far, but it is something physical that we're talking about, that it's going to protect an invention. So it used to be that copyrights lasted forever, and now that's not the case anymore. I've got a little bit of information here down below that we're going to talk about quickly here. A copyright, if it was written before 1923, it is now open for public use. So one thing, for example, the Happy Birthday song was a song that for a long time you were not able to use the rights to the Happy Birthday song without paying a hefty fine for it, or a hefty fee for it, in fact. So a lot of times places would use a song that was similar or make a different kind of Happy Birthday song instead of the Happy Birthday to You, instead of that one, because that you had to pay a high fee on in order to use it. And it finally became a public use. So if it was written between 1923 and 1978, then it will have a copyright for 95 years. And then once that 95 years is up, it will be able to be used by the public for free. And then if it was written between 1978 to present day, now it lasts for the life of the author and then 70 more years after their death. So if you wrote a book when you were 15 years old, you get to have that copyright for yourself your whole life. So if you live till you're 100, that's 85 years. And then another 70 years on top of it afterwards, that then any proceeds from that book would go to whoever you left your estate to. So your family probably is who would get the proceeds for that kind of thing. And then patents, they are given for 20 years, and they have to pay fees on those throughout. So if you created something, if you made a product and you didn't want anybody else to be able to make it, you have to apply for a patent. And if you get that patent, that lasts for 20 years, meaning nobody else can make that exact same thing. People could make things like it, but it couldn't be exactly the same. And then when that time is up, then people will be able to make it exactly the same. And then also too, that's what brings competition into the marketplace, that they might be making the same thing as you and selling it for cheaper. And then of course it's up to the consumer to decide what they're going to spend their money on. But there's also fees throughout that 20 years. And if the inventor does not pay those fees, then they lose the patent. Okay. So you don't automatically get a patent if you invent something. Keep that in mind for my young inventors here. If you decide that you're going to come up with a product that you want to market and sell, you need to apply for a patent so that nobody else can steal your idea and use it. And then they get paid and you end up not getting paid because you didn't apply for a patent. Okay. And then we have clause number 9, which is federal courts. And Congress has the power to set up inferior or lower federal courts under the Supreme Court. So we're going to actually kind of include a couple different things here. The first one is that they establish courts that are lower than the Supreme Court. And we'll talk about those when we get to Article 3, which is the judicial branch. And the Constitution is what sets up the Supreme Court. Remember, the Supreme Court is our highest court in our country. And so that is set up by our highest law. The Constitution sets up the Supreme Court. And then courts lower than that are set up by Congress. So I do want you to include that part of the answer that says the Constitution sets up the Supreme Court. That will be something that you need to know, that Constitution sets up Supreme Court. Congress sets up the lower courts, lower than the Supreme Court. And then we're going to move on to clause 11. And this is one that I hope you already know by now, that when it comes to declaring war, only Congress can declare war. Declarations of war can be granted at the request of the president. So what that means is that the president can go to Congress and request that they declare war, but the president himself cannot declare war. Only Congress can do that. And remember, we kind of talked about this before. We wouldn't want just one person being able to send our entire country and our entire military into war. And so Congress has to do that. And together, Congress is, remember, the House of Representatives and the Senate. We have 435 members in the House of Representatives. We have 100 members in the Senate. So 535 people are who are making this decision then for the entire country. Our next ones, numbers 12, 13, and 14, they're similar, but they have different clauses, but I still grouped them together. So I'm going to read 12 and 13 first, and then we'll look at number 14. So we have Army and Navy. Actually, I put them all together here, so I'm going to read all of them together. These clauses place the Army and Navy under the control of Congress. Congress decides on the size of the armed forces and the amount of money to spend on the Army and the Navy. It also has the power to write rules governing the armed forces. Okay, so first of all, just for the Army and Navy itself, for clause 12 and 13, the power of Congress is that they will decide the size of the Army and Navy and how much money is spent. And so this is also referred to as raising and supporting the military. They are going to put it in place, and then they are also going to support what they have put in place. And then 14 was still in that little paragraph that I read there, but the rules for the military, Congress is going to regulate and control the rules for the military. So they will decide the way that the military is treated, what laws, I guess, we can put it that way, what laws they have to follow. The rules for the military are going to be a little bit different than for a normal civilian person. And that is because they have different training than a regular civilian does. So they're taught basically to, kill people, right? That's part of what their training is. So they themselves could be seen as a deadly weapon. And so therefore, laws may need to apply a little bit differently to them. So they maybe have a little bit stricter laws on them because they're military, but Congress is who decides that. And then we have 15 and 16, which also I have combined here together for you. And this is about our militia. And let's see if I can get this in the right spot. There we go. Okay. So our militia, and then we have the rules for militia. So the militia is a body of citizen soldiers. Congress can call up the militia to put down rebellions or fight foreign invaders. Each state has its own militia, today called the National Guard. Normally, the militia is under the command of a state's governor. However, it can be placed under the command of the president. Congress has the power to organize, discipline, and train the militia. So the militia, this is our National Guard. These are our soldiers who help in emergency situations, but they still work a normal job. They live a normal life. They only get called in emergency situations, for example, to stop riots. And we've talked about this in a couple different situations already where we use the National Guard in our country. Members of the National Guard are only used within the United States. They don't get sent overseas, but they do get sent all over the country. So if there, is a situation going on, like in Washington, D.C., we could have militia, our National Guard from Illinois, sent to Washington, D.C. to help enforce the laws that are going on there. And then the rules for a militia, this is kind of similar to the rules for the military up above there, that the Congress is responsible for doing the organizing, the training, and the discipline for our members of the National Guard as well. And then it does mention in there, we're not going to write it, it does mention in there that it is the state governors can control their militia within their state, but the president can call militia from other states. So like I said, if they were needed in Washington, D.C., then the president of the United States can call out the militia from different states to bring them to Washington, D.C. But in our state, J.B. Pritzker is our governor. If there were a situation going on in Chicago, let's say, right, because it's our big city here, if there was a situation going on there that the local city police would not be able to handle, then he can call in the Illinois National Guard to go and help out in that situation. So every state governor has that power, and then the president can also call them into certain places around the country. And then we have national capital, 17. Congress controls the district around the national capital. In 1790, Congress made Washington, D.C. the national's capital. In 1973, it gave residents of the district the right to elect local officials, but they do not have representatives in Congress. So the power of Congress here is to control the district around Washington, D.C., or make laws for Washington, D.C. And I hope that you know what those abbreviations mean, but I will go ahead and put it in here anyways, Washington, D.C. And also, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, D.C. stands for District of Columbia. And Washington, D.C. is, it's not a city and it's not a state, it is a district. That's why it's called Washington and then D.C. on there as well. And so this is our capital of the United States. This is where the president lives in Washington, D.C. This is where our Capitol building is, where Congress meets. This is where the Supreme Court meets for our country. So this is our nation's capital, is Washington, D.C. And then we have necessary laws. And this is clause 18. Clauses 1 through 17 list the powers delegated to Congress. The writers of the Constitution added clause 18 so the Congress could deal with the changing needs of the nation. It gives Congress the power to make laws as needed to carry out the first 17 clauses. Clause 18 is sometimes called the elastic clause because it lets Congress stretch the power, stretch the meaning of its power. So they can make any laws necessary to carry out the first 17 clauses. And we didn't talk about every single one. We did skip a couple in there, but of all of those clauses, they can make any laws that they need to make sure that what they need to be carried out is being carried out. And so they call this the elastic clause. It stretches over to cover any new issues that might arise over time. And again, this is something that I've talked about before with the Constitution, and the beauty of the Constitution is that we can make it adapt to our changing world, our changing country, and things that come up, so we can fix it to the way that we need to. So it works for us in the current time period. And of course, we couldn't list every possible scenario of things that are going to happen in our country. And so that's why it's important to have a clause like 18 in there that gives the power to make those changes.